For quite a bit now, Resident Evil fans have been waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for direction, waiting to see more of what Resident Evil 9 would be. After Resident Evil 6 split the fan base, after Resident Evil 7 reinvented the series, after Village blurred the lines between horror and action. The biggest question was simple: what else have we been missing? Now in 2026, we finally have that answer. Capcom has officially pulled back the curtain on Resident Evil Requiem, a game that doesn't just continue the story, but looks like it's trying to redefine what survival horror means again. Today we're going to break down everything we know so far about Resident Evil Requiem. Everything we're going to cover is simply from information Capcom has given us. From new revelation of the January 2026 showcase to everything prior, and eventually to the very intentional story implications Capcom is laying out. This is the most comprehensive look at Resident Evil Requiem to date. So grab a seat because there's a lot to unpack. Resident Evil Requiem releases on the 27th of February 2026. No delays announced, no vague coming soon, a hard confirmed date. Now as for platforms, Capcom is clearly targeting current and next-gen hardware only. Resident Evil Requiem will launch on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and Series S, PC and Nintendo Switch 2. The last one is important. This confirms that the Requiem is scalable enough to run on Nintendo's new hardware, but still powerful enough to fully leverage the re-engine, ray tracing and advanced lighting. And just as important as what is included is what isn't. Now, there isn't a PlayStation 4 or Xbox One version. Capcom has officially left last gen behind. Resident Evil Requiem is a true dual protagonist game. Not a cameo, not a bonus chapter, not a marketing trick. Two playable leads, two perspectives, two completely different experiences. First is Grace Ashcroft, our primary horror lens for the game. Grace is an FBI intelligence analyst, not a super soldier, not a special forces operative. She's introverted, easily frightened, emotionally vulnerable, highly intelligent but not combat focused. Most importantly, she is the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, one of the protagonists from Resident Evil Outbreak. Grace is deliberately designed to experience horror the same way the player does. She panics, she hesitates, she gets overwhelmed. Capcom has openly stated that Grace exists to feel fear, not dominate it. And that alone tells us what kind of game Requiem wants to be. Then there's Leon S. Kennedy. Older, more experienced, more dangerous. Leon is fully playable, and this time, Capcom isn't pretending otherwise. His role is clear. Leon represents action, competence, and control. Firearms mastery, melee combat, with his iconic roundhouse kick included. Chainsaw combat, a Resident Evil 4 style combat UI, where Grace runs, hides, and survives, Leon confronts. This contrast isn't accidental. Capcom has explicitly said Requiem is designed to merge the most terrifying horror with the most thrilling action. Grace brings vulnerability, Leon brings power. Together, they create balance, which very few Resident Evil titles seem to get right. Resident Evil Requiem takes place approximately 30 years after the missile strike on Raccoon City. That alone is massive. Raccoon City isn't just a ruin anymore. It's partially rebuilt, partially abandoned, and partially repurposed. This isn't nostalgia bait. Capcom didn't just rebuild the city for fan service. They rebuilt it to ask a question. What happens to a place after a biological apocalypse when the world moves on? confirmed locations, we know several locations that will play major roles. Rhodes Hill Chronicle Care Center, where Grace awakens strapped to a gurney. Renwood Hotel, the site of Alyssa Ashcroft's death. Umbrella-linked facilities purchased after the city's fall. Interior city zones that appear structurally intact. This strongly suggests controlled reconstruction, not total abandonment. Someone came back, someone invested, someone wanted Raccoon City to exist again. Okay, let's put this debate to rest right now. Resident Evil Requiem is not open world. Capcom confirmed that open world concepts were tested, online concepts were tested, and both were rejected. Why? Because they weren't what the fans wanted. Instead, Requiem is single player, offline, survival horror at its core. That means limited resources, heavy emphasis on puzzles, and environmental storytelling. This isn't Resident Evil 6. This isn't a shooter with horror aesthetics. Capcom is deliberately returning to classic survival horror design. Now, one of Requiem's biggest mechanical features is its seamless camera system. Players can freely switch between first person and third person at any time. But here's the twist. Third person includes exclusive animations. Grace can trip and fall, lose her footing while being chased. These animations do not appear in first person. Why does this matter? Because it means Capcom is designing fear differently depending on perspective. First person equals intimacy, third person equals vulnerability. Now that's a level of design we don't usually see, and it's great to see Capcom put such tiny details in which overall will add up later. One of the most important confirmations from the recent showcase was how difficulty is being handled in Resident Evil Requiem. And Capcom is doing something very intentional here. There are 3 distinct difficulty modes, and each one fundamentally changes how the game feels to play. Casual mode is designed for players who want to experience the story with minimal friction. In this mode, combat is significantly more forgiving. Aim assist is fully enabled, enemies deal less damage. Resources like ammo and healing items are plentiful. This mode is about immersion and narrative, not mastery. It lets players focus on Grace's trauma, the mystery of Raccoon City, and the overarching story without constant survival pressure. Standard mode, modern survival horror balance. Standard mode is what Capcom considers the intended modern experience. Here, combat difficulty is balanced, enemy aggression is increased, resources are limited but fair. Saving is unrestricted, using modern checkpoints and typewriters. This mode reflects the design philosophy of Resident Evil 7 and Village, tense, methodical, but accessible. Mistakes matter, but they're not devastating. Standard classic, old school survival horror. This is where things get serious. Standard classic mode layers the additional Resident Evil mechanics on top of the modern experience. In this mode, you must collect engravings to save. Saving is restricted to typewriters only. Resources are scarcer. Every decision carries real consequences. This mode reintroduces fear through limitations. The same design philosophy that defined the original Resident Evil games. You're not just afraid of enemies. You're afraid of losing progress. Certain items can only be crafted using blood obtained from zombies. This creates a brutal choice. Avoid combat, which leads to fewer resources and overall a more difficult game, or engage in combat which puts higher risk but get rewarded with much better tools. Though Grace isn't meant to fight constantly, her handgun, fittingly named Requiem, is an emergency tool. Every bullet matters, every kill is a decision. This one may be one of the most disturbing reveals of all. Zombies in Resident Evil Requiem retain fragments of their former lives. Examples shown were a custodian still cleaning, a man repeatedly pressing the elevator buttons, one zombie speaking directly to Grace, not growling, not muttering, talking. This implies that a new virus strain is out in Raccoon City, which has some sort of partial cognitive preservation, which now doesn't just extend to physical horror alone, it's starting to bleed into ethical horror. And to that, we will very much feel more uneasy while playing Requiem. A former Umbrella affiliate who purchased property after Raccoon City's fall. He operates from medical facilities where he actively searches for Grace. Gillian believes Grace is special, and he's likely the one who orchestrated her capture. He represents something Umbrella never truly lost: control through experimentation. One of the biggest unanswered questions in Resident Evil Requiem is why is Grace Ashcroft considered special? And why are figures like Dr. Victor Gideon so interested in her? While Capcom hasn't given us a direct answer yet, the implications are hard to ignore. There is a strong evidence to suggest that Grace may have been exposed to viral agents during childhood, either directly or indirectly, due to her mother's involvement in the Raccoon City outbreak. As the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, one of the few civilians to survive the events of Resident Evil outbreak, Grace would have grown up in close proximity to the environment saturated with viral contamination. This opens the door to several possibilities. Grace may possess some form of genetic resistance or partial immunity, or she could be a carrier of a mutated strain that behaves differently from traditional Umbrella viruses. Any of these would make her incredibly valuable to remnants of Umbrella's research network, especially those still attempting to refine or control viral evolution. Now, in other words, Grace isn't just surviving the horrors surrounding her. She may be living proof that the virus doesn't just always destroy. Sometimes it changes. And understanding that change would be the key to everything. At the end of the January 2026 showcase, Capcom introduced a single word that immediately raised more questions than answers: Alpus. In Greek mythology, Alpus represents hope, the last thing left in Pandora's box. And that meaning feels anything but accidental. Alpus is directly tied to the murder of Alyssa Ashcroft, suggesting that her death may not have been random, nor purely the result of the chaos surrounding Raccoon City. It is also deeply connected to Leon S. Kennedy's past, implying that Leon has been carrying knowledge or responsibility related to these events for years. There are also violins that Alpus may be linked to the mysterious bite mark seen on Leon in recent trailers, suggesting possible infection, exposure, or involvement in a classified incident that was never made public. So what exactly is Alpus? At this stage, it could be a cure, a suppressed truth, or classified Umbrella project, buried to prevent panic or misuse. Whatever its true nature, Alpus represents something Leon has chosen to protect or conceal for a very long time. And as Resident Evil Requiem unfolds, it's clear that this secret is finally coming back to the surface. Not as a weapon, but as hope. Resident Evil Requiem is a true dual protagonist survival horror game, set decades after Raccoon City's destruction. focused on trauma, memory, and identity, introducing the most psychologically complex enemies the series has ever seen. Capcom isn't chasing trends, they're reclaiming Resident Evil's soul. This isn't the successor to Resident Evil 6. This is the thematic successor to Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7. And if Capcom delivers on what they've promised, Resident Evil Requiem may not just be another sequel. It might be the franchise's next defining moment. If you enjoyed this deep dive into everything we know about Resident Evil Requiem so far, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more gaming news, breakdowns, and commentary, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Resident Evil Requiem is shaping up to be a true return to survival horror? Or do you think Capcom is playing it too safe by leaning into the past? And most importantly, what do you think Outpost really is? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.